All right, wish me luck. I sat down to do an episode last week, and you ever have those times when you go to do something and then one thing goes wrong, so then try to do it again, and then something else completely different goes wrong, and it's like 4 or 5 things go wrong, and then finally you go, it's just it's just a sign, it's an omen. I can't ignore this anymore. That happened to me last week. I sat down and recorded an audio only episode, which I didn't even have the time anymore. We'll get into that in a second, but it was probably for over an hour. And I got to the end and I realized it didn't record anything. Now, the reason I made that rookie mistake after all these years is because Descript changed their whole everything. Their whole interface completely changed. And where before you would hit record once and then it would, you say record in the script into the script, not Descript, and it would start recording and you're going. Now you have to like hit that and then you have to hit record again. So I was not recording at all. And now they took it away where you can't see how much time you've been recording for, which normally I wouldn't mind, but now they have a limit where you can only process the audio on the affordable plan if it's under 60 minutes. Not under 60 minutes after you edit. The original file has to be under 60 minutes, which made me really angry because I recorded like a 1 hour and 10-minute video and I cut out 10 minutes so that I could use the processing, but I couldn't use the processing. So let's have a little bit of gripe here about Descript. Descript, you guys, you're pushing a lot of boundaries and you're doing some interesting stuff, but your support staff sucks. Sorry. When somebody's angry and they connect with your support staff and they say things like, I'm done, instead of going, okay, you're done, here's a link to cancel, shouldn't they at least try? Just try to not make the person upset? Isn't that their job? That's not what they did. They literally sent me the link. Here's where you go to cancel. So I used the link and I canceled. Now we're trying Tella. I've heard good things about Tella. That's why we're doing video. See how this all comes around. Sounds like I'm just here for a gripe. But you know what? These are my episodes. If I want to gripe, I'm going to gripe. We have a different name. We have video. We have a different name. Drunk on Ideas. Read or Die a Slave was the idea of what I wanted to do originally. It's what all of my social media was called because I was going to try to focus on books. And I've gone through this many, many times with other videos I've recorded and with my social media posts. At a certain point, if my focus is just on books, it messes up my reading because it becomes like homework. Like, oh, I got to hurry up and finish this book so I can do another episode. Instead of really taking the time. If you're reading a book that's dense, you shouldn't be speeding up. You should be slowing down. So I couldn't continue with that, but I had brought back Random Badassery, which is technically the same feed. It was the name of a podcast that I did years ago. We went over this in the audio only episode before. It was fun to bring that name back. It was fun to bring that music back. But as I was doing it each time, I felt like it was 2014, 2015 again. And it didn't fit. So as I started piecing together things, what I started to realize what I had gotten wrong with Read or Die a Slave. First of all, people never said anything, but I have a feeling that people were a little bit steered away from it because it had the word slave in it. I can kind of understand that. And I was mildly cautious of that when I went in, but me, I used to be a punk rocker when I was younger, so sometimes I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways. There's this anti-authoritarian streak in me, which sometimes I use against myself, but that was part of the problem. And then I started to really look at what I got wrong and it's not about books for me, even though I love books. It's about what I get from the books. And I used to try to interpret that like, oh, it's about learning. I'm about learning. No, I like learning, but it's not just learning. It's the ideas. It's the ideas in books. It's why I like podcasts. It's why I like good YouTube videos, which this probably doesn't count as. It's why I like technology. It's why I like EDC. There are these ideas. Like, EDC seems like the weird one there, right? But there's ideas to EDC of I'm planning on this. I want to be able to do this in a situation. I want to be prepared. There's thought there, and there's a problem solving situation that goes on there where you go, okay, what kind of situation do I think I'm in? What tools do I think can I have that would help me get through those situations? And then comes the next puzzle. And how can I make this big mass of ideas of tools that I want fit into my pockets without pulling my pants down? So you have to find smaller tools, and then it's all about ideas. It's all about ideation. It's all about experimentation. It's the same thing that I like about apps, why I play around with so many apps. Like, what can this one do? What can this one bring to me? What can I learn from this one? So that's why I went with Drunk on Ideas, because it captures the narrow focus of what I'm interested in, but it also captures the broadness. What kind of ideas? Who knows? Depends. So I have hopes. I have hopes of where this could develop. Right now, as it stands, there are 4 parts to this. There's this, which is the podcast Drunk on Ideas. What I really want this to be is what it is right this second. An unpolished, off the cuff, unplanned, unscripted download. Just me coming in and unloading what's on my head. Sometimes about the process of what I'm doing, about the process of what I'm trying to accomplish, sometimes about maybe ideas that I can't get out of my head. Maybe sometimes I'm studying light and drawing and I want to talk about that. Allowing this to be closer to a behind the scenes than a program. Does that make sense? I want this to be more personal than professional. But I have all these ideas of things that lines of thought that I want to explore. And I have hopes that, I don't know if this will ever happen, but I have hopes that as I explore them for myself through the research that I do, which does happen, that at some point some of these things will get developed enough that I will either, what I've always hoped to do, write books, or be able to do something else, like make a quote unquote professional YouTube video, something that's more focused and structured and is actually scripted based on the research I have, or another podcast series. If I go really deep in a rabbit hole on a true crime case and I end up with a ton of research, why wouldn't I do a true crime podcast limited series just to go through that? So I have hopes for those things. I just don't know if they'll happen. So right now we have this, then we have X, which is my social media, which I'm not going to lie, I've been enjoying the hell out of it recently. I don't know what changed, but it really became more of a scrapbook or a sketchbook or a notebook for me, where I'm just kind of throwing things at the wall. There's no plan. There's nothing. Basically, what happens on most days is I come in and I bust open Readwise Reader, where I have way too many things saved. And I just kind of work through like reading like 5 or 6 things for the day. And then when I see interesting stuff, I'm sharing it over there. Just here's the link. I mean, here's the quote that's really interesting. Here's the link. If I have a thought, here's the thought. And then everything else that goes on there throughout the day just is stuff that comes up while I'm working. If I have a thought about an app, I just spit it on over there. If I've thought about something I see on X itself, right there, just using it as a scratch pad. That's a really good way to look at it, as a scratch pad. And then the newsletter, which is the third part of this, is I'm moving towards the curation model. And the reason I want to do that is because, number one, there's a lot of people that don't use X anymore. There's also a really hard to solve problem in this with social media, in this constant ephemeral feed where things are just keep, it's like a river. They just keep flowing past you. And if you miss them, you miss them. Well, for these interesting nuggets that I'm pulling out of other people's writing that I think are valuable, I want to offer a place where the best of those can be collected. So what I'm doing is I'm also using it as a review for myself, so that at the end of the week, I go back and I look through everything I've posted for the week and go, what resonates with me is still really strong and valuable. And then trying to put those together, but not in a cut and paste way, but to really try to put them together and explain in a brief, tight, concise way why I think it's valuable. So that when people open it, they may disagree with me on what's valuable, but they'll understand that what I'm presenting is what I believe to be valuable. And I think those two things work really synergistically together because you have this more ephemeral medium, and then you have not necessarily a more permanent medium, but a medium that is delivered directly to you because it comes to your inbox. You don't miss it because it's going to be there. You might delete it without reading it, which I hope you don't do, but you're not going to miss it. And I think those two things work really synergistically together. And then every once in a while, I have something I want to say that's like longer. It might be short enough of a longer piece that I would just put it right on X. But I think generally what I'm thinking is anytime I have a longer piece of writing that I want to share, because sometimes things come out in writing as opposed to podcast or something else. It's not a verbal thing for me. Sometimes I have to write it out. I'm thinking I'm probably going to post the whole thing on X and post it through the newsletter. And so people can get it wherever it is instead of trying to make it like this. You have to be here to get this. I have no interest in that. I just drunk on ideas, right? I'm fascinated with ideas. I want to put those ideas out there and I want them to have a life of their own. It's not about me. It's about the ideas. It's about the good proliferation of other people's ideas. If I happen to have ideas that I think are good, put them out there and see what happens. Maybe they'll get destroyed. Who knows? But they're out there. So those three parts. And then there's a fourth part. Now, obviously, I left out the fact that this podcast is video now. So this will be on YouTube and it will be audio only. And that's honestly, it's just how it should have been at the beginning. The only reason I resisted it is because, like right now, I'm not crazy about this shirt that I'm wearing. I'm not crazy about the lighting that I'm getting from the camera that's built into my iMac. I feel weird about wearing the headphones, but I do better recording when I have the headphones. And I feel weird about the fuzzy background thing that doesn't fuzzy the background between my head and the headphones right here. All of these things. Or check out this piece of cat hair on the microphone. All these things are the reason that I tried to avoid video. But I'm not going to do it anymore. So it is what it is. The reason I'm okay with the video is not only because the Descript thing and the Tella thing. Look, there's some little artifacts of not fuzzy around my fingers there. Easily distracted. Obviously, I have a mild ADD. What was I saying? Oh, the reason that I'm doing the video too. So, was it yesterday? Yeah, I think it was yesterday. I sat down to do this. Okay, fine. Let's do the podcast. Started plugging everything in, and I was like, you know what? I don't have the brain energy to do a podcast episode. You know what I do feel like doing? I feel like talking about this topography in my app here. So I started to do a screen recording, and I recorded something in Descript, and my lips, when I was done what they had recorded, my lips were not matching the audio. It was only like 15 minutes long, but anyways, it annoyed me. I haven't opened Descript since. They can burn in hell. I don't really mean that. Can we put a pin in that? Here, I've got a little place where I can put a pin in things right here. Let's put a pin in that right there. Not talking shit. Okay, let's get back to that. What I'm trying to get to right now, before we go off on that tangent, is I started to record that. It didn't work out. I went into Loom to do it, and then 5 minutes was just too short. If you do a free video on Loom, it's 5 minutes limit, which is pretty generous for the type of things you're supposed to do with Loom. But anyways, I walked away from the computer after that, and I was just frustrated. It was the same experience that I had the week before. It was like, oh, so many obstacles in front of me. And maybe you think this is a little bit on the woo side, but I'll tell you, sometimes I get a little bit on the woo side. I'm kind of open to those type of things. I'm open to the idea of signs. I'm not going to lie, because for a lot of times in my life, they have not steered me wrong. So make of that what you will. I took it as a sign to walk away before I punched something, before I punched the keyboard. Like when we were teenagers, we used to get mad when we throw our Nintendo controller at the Nintendo. I went in the other room, started doing something else, and I don't even remember what I might have been on X, I might have been watching TV, and then all of a sudden it comes to me. You know what? Actually, I probably was watching YouTube. This is probably what happened. And it came to me, why don't I just record those weird videos about apps that I want to do? Why am I not doing that? In fact, 2 years ago, when I came back to social media and I came back to making content for the first time, I started what is now my EDC channel, my Curly's Curated. That originally was a tech channel about, at that time, I think I was just doing like Obsidian stuff, like everybody else. And it came to me that there's a reason I did that before. It's because I just kind of enjoyed it. And I actually got derailed with that channel, not just into EDC. I got derailed in the tech stuff because I went from exploring things in my app and like learning things in front of people on video to teaching. And I think that's where I lost it because it's like my content became just like everybody else's. And you know what causes that? It's the analytics and the algorithms and all of this stuff, because the algorithm wants you to succeed. People don't believe this, but the algorithm actually wants you to succeed because the more people making videos that are successful, the more money they make, right? So don't fool yourself on that. They want you to succeed. And the way that they can do that is by looking at everything else that's there and saying, okay, what are you doing and what is it similar to? Are you doing videos on tech? Okay, these are tech videos over here. What analytics can we give them that will help them understand why these videos over here are more successful than their videos, even though they're on the same topic? Where they're going to give you analytics that tell you, where people drop off and where your peak times in your video are. Unfortunately, the consequence of having this kind of analytics and paying too much attention to it is that it homogenizes everything. It accidentally, and this is not the intention of it, but it accidentally makes everything the same. Everybody ends up with a similar format because when you do something different, you pay for it in analytics, right? If you don't do the quick intro that's hot and you do a long intro, you're going to pay for it because viewers drop off. And in that case, that's probably a good one because these long intros, nobody likes them. Nobody likes them. And I used to do them. I know for a fact nobody likes them. But there are other things that you can do that the algorithm is not going to understand because it doesn't compare to other things. If you do something unique, the algorithm is not going to understand that. And your analytics are not going to understand that. And you have to realize whether what you're doing is you're doing something dumb or lazy, or whether what you're doing is something unique and different. And unique and different isn't always a good thing either. Sometimes unique and different is just, hey, you have no audience. But a lot of times what unique and different means is you just have to keep doing it long enough for the people that like that unique and difference to find it, which sometimes can take forever. Which my notes are kind of in a state right now. So I have a note somewhere that I wish I could pull up right now. It's from Chris Williamson, the guy who does the Modern Wisdom podcast. He was talking about podcasting, and I'm just going to paraphrase him right now because I don't remember the exact numbers, but he said something like, you're going to do at least 100 episodes of a podcast before you even make $1. And you're going to do like 300 episodes before even anybody even knows what you're doing. That's a lot. 300 episodes. Think about that. That's an episode every day for a year, with some days taken off. Or if you do it weekly, that's many years. I can do the math right now. I'm not a math in the head person, unfortunately. At least not in front of a camera. Believe it or not, when you're in front of a camera, there is a mild sense of panic. I could pause and do it and look smart, but then you'd see the edit. So, have I said what I'm going to do? Yeah, record the videos on tech. And I'm going to call it Drunk on Tech. It's just going to be a secondary channel of Drunk on Ideas. Drunk on Ideas is going to be this. What's funny about it is this format that we're doing right now, I already know is going to be less successful than the Drunk on Techs. So my secondary channel will be more popular than my primary channel. But what I really want to do with those tech videos is I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. Not because I'm fixated with being different, but just because I realize that I have these thoughts that I want to get out, and they just happen to be things that are different. And there's a lot of tutorials which I when I'm learning an app or I'm trying to figure out how to organize an app that I've been using forever. God, I love when you guys make those great tutorial videos and you show me your system. I love watching videos about people's systems. So none of this is criticism. This would be a good time after this to wrap around to that no talking shit thing. The other thing is reviews. I don't really want to do reviews, but what I really want to do is I just see things in apps where I'm like, oh, this works really well. Oh, this doesn't work really well. Oh, I wish this looked like this. All these type of things. I guess it's more about the experience of using the app than it is about the features and all that stuff or organizing it. I want to kind of try to touch on that kind of stuff. That seems fun for right now. I don't know how long I'll do it for. I don't have to know how long I'll do it for. But for right now, it's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to do. I think that's different. I'm sure it's not unique in the sense that I'll be the only person that's doing it and the only person that's ever done it. It's just what I want to do. And there's not a lot of models of it for me that I know of that I can compare to, which is also a good thing because sometimes when there's too many models, then you end up in that same pit of homogenizing your content and making it this person. Oh, I love how they do this. I'm going to do that. Mimicking is a good thing. You learn through mimicking, but sometimes you get stuck in trying to find a mimic for everything. So I'm going to play with that. And hopefully you guys like it. Hopefully you like something I do. You are listening to me, and you have been listening to me for like 20 something minutes. So the not talking shit thing, when you talk about apps and talk about tech, even when you talk about things on social media, there's two ways. There's more than two ways, but two ways that I'm going to mention right now. You can go about things. You can just rip into things, like I was ripping into Descript earlier. And you can really just make that your persona and just be a jerk. Or you can really try to get at what's underneath that, which is often some sort of frustration. Rarely is that frustration when I'm talking about technology or products, even like when I do my EDC stuff, which I haven't done for a while. Rarely is it about the people making the things. And rarely is it about the ideas. Generally, they're usually great ideas. Sometimes the frustration is my expectation versus the reality. The reality is not really to blame. It's the gap between my expectation and the reality. And a great example of that is when I said something several weeks ago, about having tried out Notebook LM from Google and having found the experience underwhelming. And Josh, who is the head or the VP of Google Labs, DM'd me and asked me if I could talk to him and explain, what my experience was. And I can tell you this right now. Even if my experience with the app was worse than it was, which it wasn't terrible, it just was I wasn't getting from it what I wanted. Some of that was me and some of it was just the stage of development of things. But even if I felt that way, I tell you something, I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. I think that when it comes to research and me being someone who's very interested in research, to be able to take a bunch of documents, PDFs, I don't know, census reports, huge pieces of data crime cases, things that you can't digest as a human being in a reasonable amount of time, to be able to take that in there and have the LLM read it and work with you to understand it and to find things in it, that's world changing. So you have to be careful the way you word things sometimes. Because while I was expressing my frustration, what I didn't express enough was my admiration for what they're doing and why my expectations were so high. Now, luckily, the three team members that I talked to on that call were three of the nicest people that I've virtually met. I would put them. I didn't actually meet them in flesh, but they're three of the nicest people I've met, including people that I've met in the flesh. And they're so smart, and they could explain things to me, and they're such good listeners. And you could tell from the questions they asked and the way that they listened that the only thing that mattered to them was getting this to work right. And it didn't matter that the egos were gone. And I don't think you get to that level of work on a project of that level for a company of that level without being able to turn that off and to really focus on the practicality. My point here, though, being is, let's say that I had worded that even more strongly, that message that I sent, that tweet. I guess we don't call them tweets anymore, that post. I would have never had the experience of being able to meet them. I would have never been able to have the experience of giving them my little sliver of input on their monumentous project. I would never have been able to ask them questions about things that I didn't understand about how these things work. I would have never had any of those experiences. So while I'm more about these things on social media and while I want to make videos about these things, and there are going to be criticisms of things, I'm trying to really remind myself every time to remember the people behind it and don't soften your criticism in the sense of lying, but word your criticism in a way that's useful to the person who receives it. Doesn't mean they have to agree with you. If I say, like, for example, I'm probably going to talk about this in one of my first episodes. I don't like the font that Reflect Notes uses, even though I like Reflect Notes a lot. They don't have to agree with me. They can love that font. My hope is just to express why it can be frustrating to use that font for me and maybe some other people so that they can take that into account. Maybe they'd never loved that font. Maybe they just thought it was a good choice. And then they hear this and they go, remember that other font that we considered? What if we switch to that one? It's nothing to do with me, but just being able to word things in a way that is beneficial to them, that they think, or maybe they've been debating that themselves for a long time, and all of a sudden they hear this and they go, yep, it's time for us to do the thing we've been thinking about for a long time. And it has to do with the way you word things. So while I say that I use the word reckless and undisciplined in the descriptions of these drunk on text and drunk on text, I wrote that there. It's drunk on text, drunk on tech, and drunk on ideas. I don't want to be reckless and undisciplined in the way that I word things and the way that I put them out there. It's important to me. I think these things, especially when we're talking about technology, these things are important. We're shaping the future of the world. We always have been. In the 1980s, when they were putting out the first personal computers, they were shaping the history of the world. We're still under the influence of the choices that were made then, and the things that influenced them. We're still under those. The roads in America, the width of the roads in America. I don't know if this applies to all of Europe, everywhere else as well, but in America, the shape of the roads is still based on the width of the axle on a chariot, because chariots used to make these ruts in the dirt that were the width of wheels, so that the wheels would go into these ruts. When you say you get stuck in a rut, that's actually what you're referring to, is these ruts. And the purpose of these was so that you can go faster and it would keep your wheels steady in the rut. So in a way, it was a reverse of a train track. A train track is raised above the ground. This is raised down. And instead of on the rail, you're in the rail. You're in the rut. So carts and wagons were made the width to fit in those ruts. So when they started making the early cars, which were really just like modified wagons, they used the same width. So when the cars started needing roads, they made them the same width. And then tunnels for the roads have to be the same width as that. And from what I understand, the certain parts of the rockets and space shuttles that we sent into space had to be a certain size so that they could fit on those roads and through those tunnels. So things that we were sending into space were still under the influence of the width of a horse's ass, which was the width of a wagon or a cart axle. These things are important, they're monumental. And the fact that because of some site that some people love, some people hate, that you or me could just briefly have the ear of one of the people shaping these things. It's an extraordinary thing. That is an extraordinary thing. I don't know if generations after me understand that because they've grown up with it always existing, but I didn't grow up with the internet. There was an internet, but it was only for the government at that point. We, the people, did not have internet. We did not. I was, I think I was a junior or senior in high school before I had my first computer. So your voice was limited to the people around you. The idea that you could ever have the ear of someone doing something like this, so important, was very small. You know, you could send letters and hope that someone saw your letter. You could get on the radio. You could get on TV and hope they saw it. That was it, really. You could become famous yourself, of course, you know. But it's extraordinary. I don't know. I think I'm just kind of coming to the realization of how extraordinary that is. But because of that, it's made me really think a lot about the way that I use my language. I don't, at least in the last several years since I came back to social media, I don't think I've been egregious the other way. You know, I don't get in fights and arguments like that. It's just a waste of time. But when social media first came out, none of us knew how to do it. Yeah, I did it. We all did it because we didn't know. We used to have, here's a funny story. We used to have, me and some of my friends would have competitions to see which of us could get the attention of someone famous. And at that time, we're talking about the first 2 or 3 years that Twitter existed. At that time, all the celebrities that were on social media were running their own accounts. There was no social media managers at that point. So and there was no verification badges, you just kind of had to trust it was them, but generally you could kind of tell. And so we would send each other, like, if we got a response, we would message the other person, oh, I got this person. And we'd laugh about it. And there was this person, I don't think I want to use the person's name because the person died several years after this, not because of anything to do with me. They died several years after this, but not really a famous person, but we'll say an internet famous person. And at that point, of all the people that we had got the attention of, that was like the top. And I had talked to this person, and we were young, and the social media was young. So there was no conception of, now I have a very strong conception of how someone in the public eye, how many messages they actually get. There was a YouTube video probably like 10 years ago, maybe more. No, it couldn't have been that long. 6 or 7 years ago. I think it was a famous soccer player had accidentally left the notifications for their messages or their replies on Twitter on. So they were showing up on the lock screen, and there was a video of the lock screen. It looked like the phone was glitching because it was just constant influx of messages. On the scale of famous, this person was probably a 6 or 7. So imagine an 8, a 9, or 10, how many messages there are. So that was seeing that was like my first realization. I'm getting back to why I'm bringing that up. Actually, let's make a note here. Let's see. Okay. The person that I had gotten in touch with, every time I'd see the person post something, not every time, but let's say like 80% of the time I saw the person post something, I would reply. I would say something. Just trying to talk to them the way I would talk to my friends, because at that time, the way that Twitter worked, and there was no algorithm, you just see things chronologically. So I'd go through the feed, you'd see your friend say something, you'd reply to your friend what they said. You go through next friend, next friend, next friend. It was actually social media at the time. And so every time she would post something, I would say something. Finally, she sends me a message and she's like, dude, you're replying to everything. And I didn't realize that was weird, because to me, she wasn't any different than the people in my life. But for her, getting so many messages and then so many of them being from one person was probably really weird. Didn't realize that. It's the thing about technologies. It takes a while for us to wrap our head around what the whole implication of them are, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. So I'm going to end this with one more brief story. I posted something. I think I read an article. Yeah, it was, might have been a Fast Company article on, no, it wasn't. It was that kind of business magazine, but it wasn't Fast Company, but it was an article on Tim Ferriss. And I happened to have bought the magazine and I read it. I just thought it was a really nice feature on him. And I just read this feature on Tim Ferriss in blah 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 magazine. It's really good. Whatever. It's just something really. Tim Ferriss retweeted me, and my phone almost blew up. This was probably at the peak of the Tim Ferriss show. I don't know. I don't want to say that it's gone down, but it's just like when it was considered one of the top shows. Period. There was no debate about that. And my phone was like that soccer player's phone. Boom, 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 boom. And I realized this is why when you message people that are above a certain level of notoriety, they never reply to you because they never see it. They literally never see it. Maybe that'll change with AI. Wouldn't that be a sad application of Notebook LM? Let's use Google Gemini to be able to read all of my messages on X and reply to them for me. Oh, that's a sad application. It's not far off from what some people are doing. There are some things that people are building that, what is it called? I posted this last week. Butterflies? Yeah, butterflies. It's an app where there are AI users. So it looks like Instagram, and you're posting and interacting with people, but you're also interacting with AI users that look like people, that are posting like people and talking like people and making comments. How long until your AI calls their AI and the two AIs talk to each other and the two people are just sitting on the couch picking their nose, unaware of the conversation happening between the two machines? 5 years. That's my guess. 5 years. I'm going to end this by saying what I said on when I was doing this just audio. You have any questions? Ask them. This behind the scenes type format here, personal format here, means it's open, and I don't imagine this will ever get big enough that I won't be able to see all of the messages.